Number 10, clown tries to break into Area 51. A limousine driver in a clown mask broke into a Las Vegas apartment with a fake bomb covered in fairy lights so he could hijack a plane and fly to Area 51. Yes, this is a true story. On December 8, 2021, 36-year-old Matthew Hancock told police to call him the Chosen One. He had driven the Lincoln through security gates at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, Nevada, and then broke through 2 more fences and drove like a maniac on the airport runways. Officers watched the suspect drive between planes before they could stop him. Hancock then left the truck and put on a clown mask before saying he had a bomb. Terrified workers took cover as police arrived. Hancock then told authorities he had a shotgun and a gasoline gadget in his truck, and he was arrested. He also informed authorities that he wanted to hijack a jet and fly to Area 51. Hancock was arrested, and it turns out the quote bomb was just an oxygen tank with a pressure gauge and Christmas lights. Hancock claimed the police had high security clearance, were affiliated to the mob, and had someone owed him millions of dollars. Clearly, someone needs a reality check. Number 9, Sugar Daddy. At the beginning of 2019, a former Playboy model took advantage of 71-year-old psychiatrist Thomas Burchard, an elderly man with dementia. His body was found brutally bludgeoned in the trunk of a car in the middle of the desert outside Las Vegas. Burchard took a last-minute trip to Vegas to see 25-year-old Kelsey Turner. It's unclear how Burchard and Turner met or what the exact nature of the relationship was, but he did financially support her to the tune of more than $300,000 over a relatively short period of time. Basically, this guy was her sugar daddy. Judy Erb, Burchard's fiancée in California, became worried when he never returned home, and she knew in her heart that something terrible had happened to him. Burchard had always been a nice and generous man, but recently had started to forget things. Judy was concerned that Vegas wasn't a good idea, and she was right. The car that Burchard's body was found in ended up belonging to Kelsey, and police arrested her and charged her with the gruesome murder. They also charged her boyfriend Logan Kennison and Diana Pena, her roommate, with the crime. Pena claimed that she had no direct involvement with the murder and blamed her co-defendants. She pleaded guilty to accessory to murder while Turner and Kennison chose to fight the allegations being made against them. Prosecutors spared Turner from the death penalty, and as of earlier this year, the cases are still ongoing. Number 8, Hilton Arson. The Las Vegas Hilton is well known for hosting headlining artists such as Elvis Presley and Liberace, but the famed hotel is also the site of one of the city's most tragic crimes. In 1981, Philip Klein had only been a busboy at the Hilton for 2 days when a fire broke out in an elevator lobby near him on the 8th floor. He told visitors that he used a trash can to spray water on the flames. The fire destroyed much of the building, killing 8 people and wounding 200 more. Klein's actions were originally commended, but investigators got suspicious when he had a Freudian slip, telling authorities he grabbed a trash can and filled it with fire, not water. Klein's statement was questioned further by investigators, and he eventually broke down. He admitted to setting the fire, but he did it accidentally when the joint he was smoking caught fire and set some nearby curtains ablaze. When investigators were unable to duplicate a fire starting in the way he described, they doubted that version of events. Klein was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of 8 murder charges and 1 act of arson. He later gave an interview where he revealed the truth about what happened. Before work, a friend gave him a PCP-laced joint, and while high on PCP, Klein set fire to several curtains with a cigarette lighter. Moral of the story? Don't do drugs, kids, especially at work. Number 7, The Murder in Concrete. Adult entertainer Esmeralda Gonzalez vanished from her home in 2019. The 24-year-old's body was found in the Nevada desert outside Las Vegas months later. Someone had bound her body with tape, stuffed her into a water tank, encased the tank with cement, and covered everything with wood. A medical examiner determined that Esmeralda most likely died from being fed a toxic substance or strangulation. Cops arrested 45-year-old Christopher Prestipino along with his girlfriend Lisa Mort. Prosecutors also identified another suspect in the slaying, Cassandra Garrett, whom they believed to have participated in the killing. All 3 were brought up on a slew of charges related to Esmeralda's murder. Court documents revealed that they had allegedly tied their victim to a bedpost and injected her with pool cleaner before strangling her to death. Their motive remains unclear. In late 2020, Prestipino was committed to a psychiatric hospital amid claims that his mental health was deteriorating, which put the trial on hold indefinitely. In order to face justice in court, Prestipino will have to demonstrate that he's well enough to understand the entirety of the situation. Until then, he will continue to stay at the loony bin. Number 6. Kidnapping of Steve Wynn's daughter. The casino tycoons who control the Las Vegas Strip are worth billions of dollars, and that net worth makes them and their families targets for thieves looking to earn a fast buck. On July 26, 1993, Steve Wynn, the CEO of the firm that owns Treasure Island and the Bellagio, had just returned home from work when he received a call from a man who claimed that he had kidnapped his daughter. Kevin Wynn, Steve Wynn's 26-year-old daughter, was taken from her house in an elite Las Vegas area by two armed men. The kidnappers demanded $2.5 million in ransom, but when Wynn told them that it was all the cash he had on hand, they agreed to $1.45 million. Wynn removed the money from the casino vault and placed it in a white plastic bag in a parked vehicle a few miles from the Strip. When the kidnappers received the ransom, they called Wynn and told him his daughter could be found at McCarran International Airport. Wynn found his daughter bound but safe in a car in the airport parking lot. One day after the kidnapping, an athletic club manager named Ray Cuddy strolled into the car dealership in Newport Beach, California, and tried to pay for a new Ferrari with $200,000 cash. The FBI was waiting for Cuddy when he returned to the dealership a few days later to finish the transaction. Jacob Sherwood, Cuddy's accomplice, was also arrested soon after. Both men were convicted of kidnapping-related counts and sentenced to decades in federal prison. Do you think they would have gotten away with it if they hadn't tried to buy a car? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 5. Law student. Police in Las Vegas received a disturbing call last year from Justin Medoff, a 31-year-old law student, who allegedly woke up to find his 28-year-old girlfriend, Stephanie Duarte, quote, beaten, bloody, and unconscious. When the cops arrived at the couple's hotel room, it was covered in blood. Medoff had allegedly bathed Stephanie and tried to revive her. When medical professionals tried performing CPR on the young woman, they discovered that she was in rigor mortis, the state of decomposition that causes a corpse to become stiff. This meant that she had been dead for several hours from blunt force trauma. The couple had argued out in public the night before and returned to the room separately. Hotel guests reported hearing screaming from the room between the 2 and 3 o'clock hours of the morning. Officers noticed scratch marks on Medoff and interrogated him about what really went down. He admitted that he and Stephanie had argued but denied having anything to do with her death. Medoff's story failed to convince the authorities of his innocence, and now he faces charges of murder with a deadly weapon. The aspiring young attorney's future has dramatically changed as he now finds himself on the complete opposite side of the law. Number 4. The Watch Thief. Wendy Rose Jones, 23, was arrested on multiple counts of felony grand larceny after two men reported watch thefts from their hotel rooms at the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas in February and March of 2021. In the first case, Cosmopolitan Security contacted police after a man reported being the victim of grand larceny and potentially being drugged. He told officers he met a woman named Rosa inside the hotel near the bar. He then went to his room and drank more with her. The police stated that the man didn't remember much of the night when he fell asleep after drinking. The man also told police Rosa may have drugged him because he woke up the next morning to find $1,500 in cash was missing from his wallet. His Audemars Piguet Royal Oak watch worth $37,000 was also gone. The man told police the woman had distinctive tattoos, including a lion on her thigh. In the second case, a man told police he met a woman on the casino floor and invited her to his room, where he ordered room service. He said he noticed she had a gigantic lion or tiger tattooed on her leg. He awoke the next day to find his $45,000 Rolex Daytona watch and iPhone 12 stolen. He also admitted to investigators that he had been drugged. Jones was arrested by Las Vegas police in late April 2021. She is currently out of custody since no criminal charges were filed against her in either case, though she still has hearings to attend. Number 3. Supermarket Massacre. In recent years, the United States has seen a string of mass shootings, and Las Vegas is no stranger. On June 3, 1999, Zane Floyd, a 23-year-old ex-Marine, walked into an Albertsons supermarket carrying a 12-gauge shotgun. He shot an employee next to a row of shopping carts near the entrance before rampaging through the store and killing 3 more workers. Floyd was then seen on surveillance camera chasing Zachary Emneger before shooting him in the back and then again on the ground. Zachary Emneger was injured but alive, and he thought that playing dead was his best option. Floyd walked around the store before returning to Zachary's body, stopping for a moment, concluding he was dead. Floyd tried to flee on foot after shooting everyone he could find in the store, but the police had surrounded him. Floyd then stood outside the shop with a gun to his head. He was finally coaxed into surrendering and was convicted of 4 charges of murder, as well as sexual assault on an exotic dancer that he had committed early that morning. He is currently on death row in Nevada, awaiting execution. Number 2. O.J. Simpson sports memorabilia heist. We all remember O.J. Simpson from his professional football career and his appearances as a comedy actor. And his murder trial for the deaths of his ex-wife and her lover. Simpson was acquitted of murder, but the families of the murder victims won a multi-million-dollar civil case against him, putting him in financial jeopardy. It was his financial difficulties that landed him in prison. In 2007, the majority of Simpson's income was still being taken to pay off his civil judgments, when he received a phone call from auction house owner Thomas Riccio, saying 2 sports memorabilia dealers would be selling items once owned by Simpson in Las Vegas. Riccio arranged for Simpson and the memorabilia merchants to meet in a hotel room about a mile from the strip, but Riccio put a small tape recorder on a dresser without anyone knowing. Simpson arrived at the hotel room with 5 accomplices, several of whom had guns. Simpson directed his friends to keep everyone in the room from leaving while he collected the items from the merchants. The robbery was finished within 6 minutes, and Simpson and his friends were seen on video joking about their exploits over dinner. But they couldn't be happy for long. When the authorities interrogated Simpson, he claimed no one in his entourage had a gun during the event, and he was simply trying to recover items taken from his residence. Simpson's story unraveled, though, when the audio recording was released and some of Simpson's accomplices volunteered to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Simpson turned down a plea agreement that would have given him 2 to 5 years in prison and instead chose to go to trial. Simpson was convicted and sentenced to 33 years in jail for kidnapping and armed robbery after several weeks of testimony. It just goes to show you that you only get one get-out-of-free-jail card in your life. Number 1. The Biker Bandit. The casinos that line the Vegas Strip have insane security. As a result, few are ever robbed, and when they are, offenders are usually captured pretty quickly. On December 14, 2010, a man strolled through the Bellagio Hotel and Casino after parking his motorcycle. He approached a craps table while wearing his helmet, then pulled out a revolver. The dealer turned over his chips, and the thief dashed back through the casino, riding off on his bike onto the busy Las Vegas Strip. The robber stole $1.5 million in chips, but here's the thing. They would have to be either returned to the casino or sold to a third party for them to have any value. A few weeks after the robbery, the Salvation Army bell ringer attempted to cash a $25,000 chip given to him by a stranger. Soon after that, a man calling himself the Biker Bandit surfaced on the internet, offering to sell more of the $25,000 chips. Undercover Las Vegas cops set up an appointment to buy some and arrested the foolish man. The biker's name was Carleo, and he had been a visitor at the Bellagio at the time of the crime, and even went to the casino afterwards to drink and gamble. He allegedly robbed another casino 3 weeks before the Bellagio heist, making off with $18,000 in cash. Carleo was also the son of a local judge, which added yet another twist to the story. He was convicted and sent to prison for his crimes. Number 10. Time travel. In April 2017, an Oregon man's guilt led him to researching time travel. He wasn't doing it to be a hero, though. Instead, he wanted to reverse a horrible mistake. 30-year-old William Hargrove was done being single, so he signed up for a dating app and met 27-year-old Anna Repkina, a Russian woman who'd just broken up with her boyfriend of 7 years. There was an instant spark between them, and within weeks, Repkina was ready to fly 5,500 miles from Moscow to Oregon for her new lover. Her 10-day trip was almost too good to be true. Hargrove proposed to her with a beautiful engagement ring. What she didn't know, though, was the fact that all this time, he'd been having an affair with his landlady, Michelle Chavez, who was married herself. So it turned into quite the love triangle. The landlady actually wanted him to leave Repkina and gave him an ultimatum to choose who he wanted. Just 2 days later, a groundskeeper near Alsia found the Russian bride's dead body near a remote logging road. It would have been impossible to trace her murder back to Hargrove, but he made the mistake of leaving a KFC receipt near her body, which led to his arrest. Interestingly, the man was researching time travel in the wake of her murder and kept frantically asking people if they knew any way of turning back time. On top of wanting to sell his soul for a time travel machine, he'd also written down magic spells to reverse the clock. Still, all that guilt didn't stop him from stopping by an ATM and withdrawing $800 from his fiance's account. Even though he blamed Chavez for the murder, he was eventually put in prison for life. Number 9. Football player. Number 9. Football player. In April 2022, Portland police were called to a local bar at 1 a.m. regarding a shooting. Once there, they found a dead body. It was later identified as a 19-year-old college student named Amara Marluke, who was not only an on-campus leader, but an activist and a big part of Portland State University community. She was shot and killed right in front of Max Market near the cheerful Tortoise Bar. Here's where it gets interesting. The suspect who fled the scene that night actually confessed. 20-year-old Keenan Harpole was the murderer and turned himself in at the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office just hours after the shooting. He used to play on the school's football team but was no longer on the roster. No one even knew Harpole and Marluke had a relationship, and it was only after a thorough investigation that detectives reached a conclusion. According to them, it was a surefire case of domestic violence. Harpole was booked into Multnomah County Jail on charges of second-degree murder and unlawful use of a weapon. Number 8. The Hitman. We've seen countless cases of someone committing murder in self-defense, but what happened in Portland in 2006 will go down as the most insane act of defiance ever. 51-year-old Susan Walters had been married to her husband Michael Kuhnhausen for more than 15 years, but their relationship was far from perfect. In fact, Michael actually wanted to get rid of his wife without getting a divorce. He devised a sneaky plan to hire a hitman to do his dirty work. He paid $50,000 to a crack addict named Edward Haffey and told him to bludgeon Susan to death. He was supposed to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. Haffey then broke into Walter's home and waited for her. As soon as she stepped in, he pounced and started hitting her with the hammer. He hadn't anticipated that she'd fight back too, though, because after 15 minutes of struggling, she managed to wrestle him to the ground and grab his throat. She then relaxed her grip, demanding to know who'd sent him, but as soon as he tried to break free, she choked him to death. Thankfully, it didn't take long for her to confirm her suspicions. She found a note in the hitman's backpack linking him to her husband, so Michael had no other option but to plead guilty to a charge of soliciting to commit aggravated murder. He spent 8 years behind bars, and Susan, on the other hand, installed a security system and sued him for $1 million just so he wouldn't pull something similar off again. Number 7. Person of interest. In November 2018, a defense attorney was named the prime suspect in his own wife's murder. 47-year-old Tricia Carver lived with her 42-year-old husband Lamar Carver and was reported missing by her family members in Hillsborough. Unfortunately, the search didn't pan out the way everyone had hoped, since the authorities found her dead body in a field near St. Paul that same day. Now, since the couple lived together, all of the fingers were pointing towards the defense attorney husband named Lamar. The Marion County Sheriff's Office even issued a search warrant to go into the home and look for clues. And when they arrived at the home, though, all they found was yet another dead body. It was indeed Lamar, who apparently had self-inflicted gunshot wounds. And that being said, it's unclear how long he'd been dead before they discovered him. Of course, no suspects were set in stone, which makes the whole situation even more questionable. The assumption here was that he couldn't bear to get caught for killing his wife, and at the same time he could have also shot himself to avoid suspicion. Regardless, everyone involved in the case was devastated. A spokesperson for the sheriff's office said that they've now got 2 families reeling, which makes this case so much worse. In fact, to this day, the case remains unsolved. Number 6. The author. Ever heard of someone being suspiciously specific about something, almost as if they've experienced it for themselves? Yeah, well, it turns out the author of How to Murder Your Husband really knew what she was talking about. 71-year-old Nancy Crampton Brophy, a romance novelist, was probably speaking from experience when she wrote her essay, since, apparently, she did actually kill her 63-year-old husband Daniel Brophy in 2018. According to the prosecutors, the murder was motivated by money issues and a life insurance policy. Here's the interesting part. She claimed she had no reason to kill her husband since their financial problems were largely solved by cashing in some of their retirement savings. To add to that, the essay was actually written in 2011, almost 7 years before the actual murder. That being said, the writing was still very detailed, with listing options for committing an untraceable crime. So perhaps she'd been contemplating the murder for a decade. Then again, you can't do much against solid evidence since she owned the same model of gun used to kill her husband. Plus, she was also seen driving to and from the crime scene by witnesses. Besides, even though the police never found the actual gun that killed Brophy, it's believed that Nancy swapped out its barrel, used it in the shooting, and then threw it away. Nancy was eventually charged with second-degree murder. Number 5. Burn pile. In November 2018, Beaverton police got a report about some weird things happening in the neighborhood. When they got to the scene, they found what can only be described as a charred body. In fact, it was so badly crisped that it almost took 2 months to identify. It was Amy Lowe, who lived on Allen Boulevard with 42-year-old Alan Muniz and another man. Right after the identification, police went to the home to investigate with a search warrant, and it didn't take long for them to link Muniz to the murder. Apparently, he'd beaten Lowe to death and then chucked her into a burn pile in the backyard. He was probably hoping for her body to turn to ash, but thankfully, the neighbors realized the stench wasn't just part of some barbecue. Even though he was arrested on the spot, his real intentions were never really uncovered. Interestingly, this wasn't his first offense either. He'd recently been released from prison for first-degree robbery, so maybe he was just trying to one-up his own disturbing record. Muniz was later convicted of murder and first-degree abuse of a corpse. Number 4, the voices made me do it. In October 2021, a meth-induced trip resulted in not one, but 2 murders in the Portland area. 45-year-old Michael Van Domelen, who lived in an apartment complex on Northwest 6th Avenue, wasn't in his right mind when he charged into a neighbor's apartment holding a 9mm gun in his pocket. Apparently, he was high on meth and heard voices in his head telling him to do stuff. So instead of questioning anything, he went ahead and gunned down 2 people. Now, obviously, the other neighbors heard the shots and rushed to the hallway to see what the commotion was. One of them, after seeing the dead bodies, even ran into Michael on his way back. Not only that, but he asked the guy if he knew who fired the gun. His response? I did. Police quickly responded to the distress call. They arrested Michael straight away. He actually admitted to the murder while talking to the police as well, claiming the voices told him to kill people. His tone changed really quickly when he reached court. He pleaded not guilty, but by then though, it was already too late because he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Number 3, refrigerated. In September 2021, 3 people were arrested after the body of a 24-year-old was found in a refrigerator. The Medford police got a call about an assault on Royal Avenue in the middle of the day, and while there wasn't anything too suspicious going on, they did see someone run into a nearby apartment. They detained the suspicious person and later found a dead body inside their fridge. Identified as Aaron Stitt, the body had severe skull fractures, as if he'd been beaten by a hammer. When it initially seemed like a classic homicide, the case turned into a Pandora's box of possibilities after they realized that the first suspect wasn't even the apartment's owner. Instead, it belonged to 20-year-old Bryson Schofield, who was arrested with 25-year-old Austin McLeod and his younger brother Dylan. Not only that, but police also found firearms on the property, only by chance though, because the suspects tried very hard to clean the scene of any evidence. Here's the fascinating part. Apparently Stitt stole from one of his killers before the incident, and they wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine by robbing him. But clearly, something went horribly wrong. All 3 suspects were charged with murder as well as concealment of evidence. Number 2, the ALLFATHER. When an Oregon medical student was asked to donate sperm in the late 80s, he was promised that only 5 kids would be born, all far away from him. But little did he know he'd end up becoming a father to nearly a whole football squad. In 2019, Dr. Bryce Cleary filed a $5.25 million lawsuit against Oregon Health and Science University, claiming that they didn't honor their promise of only using his sperm for East Coast residents. Instead, most of it was used for kids in Oregon. The 5 children he was promised back in '89? Well, it turns out his juices were potent enough for over 17 babies. The majority of the children went to school, church, or social functions with each other without even realizing they were half-siblings. Cleary claimed that he was a victim of fraud and suffered emotional distress after hearing about the births. He found out about the other kids when a couple of them tracked him down through Ancestry.com. It was only when he sent off his own DNA to the website that he realized he was a father to at least 17 kids. Yeah, that's not really a great look, but hey, at least he can claim to be one of the most fertile men in Oregon. Number 1, dumped in a landfill. In August 2022, a Washington County woman was reported missing, and only 4 days later, her body was found dead in a landfill dumpster. 27-year-old Kaylee Birdsell was in an abusive relationship with 31-year-old Fabian Hernandez. While she didn't want to be with him anymore, she couldn't leave him because he'd regularly threatened to do something if she did. Kaylee also couldn't run away because her boyfriend lived with her and watched her, so even if she wanted to escape, she wouldn't have been able to. To make things worse, Fabian carried a firearm all the time, and sadly it proved to be the cause of Kaylee's death. She'd been traveling through a rural area in her Jeep and stopped one night to get some shut-eye. Little did she know, though, that this was a permanent slumber. Fabian, for some reason, pulled the gun out and shot her several times. The gun he used was a large-caliber revolver. He then dragged her body to the Coffin Butte landfill in Corvallis and threw it in a dumpster. Obviously, it wasn't hard for someone to realize there was a rotting, smelly corpse in the dumpster, especially with the smell of decomposing flesh in the air. It didn't take long for police to get to the scene and confirm it was Kaylee. As a result, Fabian was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for his crimes. Number 11, Murderous Son. Brian Peck, 60 years old, was convicted in February 2022 of murdering his mother, 76-year-old Gail Peck, which he claimed he committed in self-defense after she allegedly approached him with a huge knife for playing his music so loudly. Peck testified in court that he threw his mother to the ground and stomped on her until she died. He then dissected his mother's body and dumped parts of it into Lake Michigan. He put the other parts in a duffel bag filled with stone bricks and dumped them in Chicago's Lagoon Park. A fisherman discovered the decomposing body pieces. On October 27, 2017, Peck reported Gail missing to the Elgin Police Department, claiming she had not come home after walking her dog. He was apprehended on October 31, 2017. Peck was sentenced to 50 years in prison for first-degree murder, 20 years for dismemberment, and 5 years for concealing her death. The judge noted in court that Peck had irreparable depravity, and the worst part was listening to him testify about how he sawed her into pieces with no emotions at all. He will now spend the rest of his life in prison. Number 10. Frying pan. In August 2012, 37-year-old Nora Leach Peterson from Elgin, Chicago attacked her boyfriend. She struck him in the head repeatedly with a frying pan until he was no longer breathing. Nora and 55-year-old Michael N. Mielzarek got into an argument in the apartment they shared in the 100 block of South State Street. Things escalated pretty quickly and Nora began throwing things at Michael. When that wasn't making her feel better, she picked up a frying pan and began her vicious beatdown. After being hit multiple times, Michael fell to the floor, hit his head again on the way down, and died. Nora called 911, but it was too late. An autopsy later revealed that he had died from blunt force trauma to the head caused by the fall. But he wouldn't have fallen if Nora hadn't been hitting him on the head with a frying pan. Nora was accused of first-degree murder and sentenced to a minimum of 22 years in prison. Number 9. Chicago Rippers. Robin Gecht, along with her brothers Andrew and Thomas Corraleus and Edward Spreitzer, carried out a series of heinous murders in Chicago and the surrounding area in the early 1980s. They were known collectively as the Chicago Rippers, or the Ripper Crew. They mistreated and mutilated women, as well as cannibalized and desecrated their corpses after killing them. While operating as a satanic cult, they were said to take sadistic pleasure in their crimes. Gecht, the group's eldest at 30 years old, was recognized as the mastermind and leader, with one detective working on the case later remarking that he made, quote, Manson appear like a Boy Scout. The Rippers were implicated in the disappearances of 17 women, as well as the unconnected random drive-by fatal shooting of Rafael Tirado, a 28-year-old drug dealer. On May 23, 1981, Gecht and the others claimed their first victim, 28-year-old Linda Sutton, was taken in their van. Her lifeless body was discovered 10 days later in a field in Villa Park, Illinois, mangled with her left breast removed. The Rippers claimed numerous additional female victims in the Chicago region. They employed the same tactic of kidnapping and subjecting the women to ritualistic torture and abuse before killing them by strangling, stabbing, or shooting. On December 6th, 20-year-old Beverly Washington, the Ripper's final victim, was discovered clinging to life by a train track. Her left breast had been removed and her right breast was virtually severed, in addition to other injuries. She survived and provided a precise description of her assailants and the van they were using, which resulted in their arrests. Thomas Corraleus admitted that he and others had abducted women and taken them to Gecht's residence, which was described as a satanic chapel. The victims were ritualistically assaulted and had their breasts removed with a wire garrote, often while they were still alive. According to Corraleus, the guys would then eat a sacramental piece of the cut body parts. The victims were then allegedly executed while Gecht recited passages from the Satanic Bible. Gecht was the only one who maintained his innocence and was the only one convicted of attempted murder and other connected crimes. He was sentenced to 120 years in jail and will be eligible for parole in 2042. The presiding judge labeled him a demon and a monster for his heinous crimes. Thomas Corraleus received a lighter sentence for his cooperation and was released in 2019, but his brother Andrew was executed by lethal injection in 1999 and was the final convict executed in the state of Illinois until capital punishment was abolished in 2011. Spreitzer, dubbed every woman's nightmare by the prosecution, received a death sentence that was eventually converted to life in prison without the possibility of release. Number 8. Walking Man. At 4 a.m. on a late May morning in 2022, 75-year-old Joseph Cromelis, a homeless man, was doused in flammable liquid and set on fire in the 400 block of North Wabash. The suspect fled after committing the act. Cromelis, also known as the Walking Man in Chicago, was on fire for almost 3 minutes before a security guard from Trump Tower used a fire extinguisher to put out the flames. The culprit has been identified as Joseph Guardia by police. Before this encounter, the two men were said to have never met. Guardia was detained on May 27th in the 2400 block of West Belmont Avenue on suspicion of aggravated arson and attempted murder. Guardia told police he thought he was setting fire to a pile of blankets and had no idea there was a person below them. Prosecutors, on the other hand, called that an outrageous lie, as according to police, Cromelis' legs and head were exposed and visible under the blankets. Guardia is also further accused of pouring gasoline from a McDonald's cup onto Cromelis' head. Cromelis is not expected to survive his injuries. Guardia later told authorities that his motivation for the crime was being so angry that he just had to set something on fire. We doubt any of what he said is going to let him off the hook. His trial is still ongoing. Number 7. Hill and Stanton. In January 2019, a 17-year-old Phillips High School student-athlete was charged with murder in the death of a transgender escort with whom he had an intimate relationship. On August 30th, 2018, Tremont Hill, a high school basketball standout and father of one, lured Jajane Stanton to an isolated place in the 4000 block of South Calumet Avenue in Bronzeville. It was there that Hill shot 24-year-old Stanton in the head. An investigation was launched and authorities discovered text exchange between Hill and Stanton. Hill had pretended to be 18 years old and told Stanton that he wanted to have a physical relationship with her. They met up at a Southside hotel and had intercourse. The subsequent conversation between them revealed Hill's inner difficulty as a result of Stanton's gender identity. In text messages after their first encounter, Hill informed Stanton that he was confused about his sexuality and that he'd been thinking about self-harm since their last contact. They planned to meet on August 30th, where Hill allegedly murdered his former sweetheart in cold blood. A search warrant was served at the teen's house, yielding a shirt and pants that matched those seen on security videos, as well as small bloodstains on the garments. Hill was charged as an adult and, if convicted, could get life in prison. Number 6. Prime Suspect. Charisma Erzman, a 20-year-old nursing student, was reported missing after she was last seen leaving her Forest View residence on January 23, 2022. She was discovered lifeless with a jacket covering her face in the backseat of her vehicle in the 5900 block of West Iowa Street a few days later. Erzman was pronounced dead at the scene, and the medical examiner's office in Cook County ruled it a homicide by strangulation and smothering. A police investigation identified 24-year-old Richard Chavez as the key suspect in her death. Cell phone records showed that he and Erzman had been communicating online and that the young woman had driven to his Oak Park house on January 23rd. At around 10:40 p.m., a private surveillance camera caught him coming down the sidewalk and going inside with Erzman. She was not observed leaving the house, and the next morning, Chavez drove her car to the site where it was later discovered. He immediately called his brother for a ride. After being arrested, Chavez informed police that he and Erzman had had consensual contact and that she had left his house by the time he awoke. While being in prison, Chavez called his parents and told them to get his passport ready in a taped call. The case is still ongoing, and according to the most recent information, Chavez has been denied bail. Number 5. Stealing an ambulance. In April 2022, a man was charged with stealing a Chicago Fire Department ambulance and leading police on an 80-mile or 128-kilometer chase. 46-year-old Benjamin Harrington approached the ambulance as it sat empty and parked on the street outside a fire station at around 4:40 p.m. Thankfully, there were no patients inside when it was stolen. Officers pursued the ambulance down Interstate 55 while the driver sped away at more than 70 miles per hour or 112 kilometers per hour. After 2 hours on the run, a tire on the ambulance blew out and Harrington tried to run away, but he was arrested after a much shorter chase on foot. He was charged with fleeing from police, resisting arrest, and possession of a stolen vehicle. Number 4. 2 Seconds of Freedom. A local drill rapper was assaulted and shot multiple times in July 2021, only seconds after being released from the Cook County Jail. 31-year-old Landre Sylvester, also known as KTS Dre, died after receiving 64 bullet wounds all over his body. Sylvester walked out of the jail and towards a vehicle that had been waiting for him, when 2 unidentified shooters arrived in 2 cars and opened fire on him. A 60-year-old woman accompanying the rapper was hit in the knee, while a second woman traveling through the vicinity was injured in the mouth by a bullet. After receiving medical attention, both victims were reported to be in good condition. A Cook County Sheriff's Office processing photo revealed Sylvester with a number of conspicuous tattoos on his body, including a target symbol on his neck and the message, "Kill to Survive." He'd originally been jailed for violating a bail bond after reportedly failing to meet release requirements in a 2020 felony gun case. It's unknown whether the brutal ambush was gang-related, a personal vendetta, or some other type of revenge, and no arrests have ever been made, according to the most recent information supplied to the media. Number 3. Drinking bleach. In March 2017, 24-year-old Yasmin Elder got into an argument with her boyfriend, 26-year-old Darius Ellis. The couple was sitting in a van in West Englewood at 1:43 a.m. when the conversation they were having took a dramatic and deadly turn. Yasmin overpowered Darius and then poured chlorine bleach down his throat. She forced him to swallow the dangerous substance. When a person drinks bleach, the symptoms can range from pain and irritation in the mouth and throat to pain and possible burns in the esophagus, vomiting, convulsing, shock and damage to the gastrointestinal tract and internal organs. Officers who were called to the scene found him lying unconscious on the ground. He was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to the chemicals at 3:26 a.m. and died. Yasmin was arrested later that day at 5:30 p.m. Number 2. Rival gangs. On August 4th, 2020, while shopping in the posh Gold Coast suburb, rapper FBG Duck was shot several times in an incident carried out in broad daylight. The 26-year-old rapper, who went by the stage name Carlton Weekly, suffered injuries to his pelvis, chest, and neck. In the aftermath of the shooting, a video leaked on social media showed a man in a blue tracksuit believed to be Weekly lying face down on the street with 2 officers nearby. In the audio from the tape, the bystander who took the video can be heard saying, "They shot FBG Duck." The rapper, who was a member of the Flyboy gang and signed to Sony Records, was critically injured. He was taken to Northwestern Memorial Hospital and later pronounced dead. 2 others, a 26-year-old lady and a male in his mid-30s, were critically injured in the shooting. Later, they were reported to be alive. In October 2021, a federal indictment was unsealed, revealing the identity of the 5 men arrested and charged with the murder in connection with the incident. They were reported as members of the O-Block Street Gang, which brutally protected its areas on the south side and claimed responsibility for several acts of violence in the city. The perpetrators ranged in age from 22 to 30. Weekly, who frequently rapped about gun violence, was apparently a member of a rival gang. Authorities stated that he had made disparaging remarks regarding O-Block, which was regarded as a possible motive for the shooting. Charles Liggins, Kenneth Robertson, Carlos Alford, Christopher Thomas, and Marcus Smart, according to the indictment, emerged from 2 vehicles and fired roughly 38 rounds at Weekly. They were charged with murder in the assistance of racketeering, assault in the aid of racketeering, and a variety of weapons offenses. If the alleged gangsters are proven guilty, they may face life in jail or the death penalty. Number 1. Wrong place, wrong time. In the spring of 2022, a Chicago street was renamed to honor the memory of a young woman named Kaylin Pryor who was murdered. Just 20 years old, Kaylin Pryor had recently received a modeling contract out of 500 competitors and was on the eve of a promising career when she was killed in November of 2015. She grew up in Evanston and was on her way to catch a bus after spending the day with her grandma in Englewood. Someone opened fire from a passing SUV, killing the young woman who was not believed to be the intended target. According to the most recent reports, no suspects have been apprehended and the model's murder remained unsolved. In April 2022, family and friends returned to the 74th and South May Street intersection to dedicate a sign to Pryor. Alan Scott, the victim's father, had dedicated his life to anti-violence initiatives in the years following her death. He expressed optimism that the billboard will rekindle interest in Pryor's case by reminding people that a $30,000 reward was available for the arrest and conviction of her assailant. Thanks for watching. So, will you be steering clear of Chicago on your next trip? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.